now. But it used
Just
to
on
be...
the way here, a small urchin annoyed me.
It used to be considered not only empirically, but in every other sense, a good thing.
How is he holding that child up? He's got his thumb wedged in his...
He's giving us...
That's the only way of holding him up. It's like a bowling ball.
I don't know whether that's a Dickensian Do the Boys Fall from Nicholas Nickleby or something similar. But generally speaking, almost everybody was agreed that it was good for children to be beaten. There was the Bible. He who spareth the rod hateth his son. Withhold not correction from your child. Beat him with the rod, and thou shalt deliver his soul from hell. Apparently. Children were always beaten. Really, we are the first generation. I mean, I'm not. I was beaten a huge amount when I was a child. At prep school, God, yes. From the age of 7 till 13, at least twice a week. I was a bad boy, and I was always being thrashed.
What for?
Oh, stealing, lying, cheating, being cheeky, being a nuisance, evading games.
Being a smart-ass.
Yeah, being a smart-ass.
Too clever for your own good, that sort of thing. Always telling everybody what was going on.
All the things that annoyed people about...
Well, it certainly beat that out of you, didn't it?
Yeah, they did. Exactly. And I was beaten a great deal, and did me no harm at all. But it was common practice. But it was outlawed in state schools when? When was it actually made a law that you were not allowed to strike a child?
You think.
I'd guess under New Labour, I would guess.
No.
No?
70s, in the 70s?
It was 1986. 1986 when it was made illegal in state schools to beat children. And it was a very close
Under
vote.
Margaret Thatcher.
231 to 230.
In state schools?
It was by one. And it was only... Do you know whom the state school children have to thank for the fact that they were not beaten from that day forward? It's rather odd.
Michael Howard or something?
No, it's even weirder.
Alan Widdicombe.
No, it's just too weird to be believed. Fergie, dear Duchess of York Fergie.
The manager of Manchester United?
No, Duchess of York Fergie, as I said. I will repeat, Duchess of York Fergie, until you understand which Fergie I mean.
Finished my Fergie material. A tractor?
A massive Fergie, yes, you can say.
Why?
That Fergie. Well, because it so happened that the vote was on that day that she was marrying Prince Andrew.
Yeah.
And
She loves to marry Prince Andrew.
I think marrowing a prince is illegal.
Thank you for that. What a great expression. There's some time for some marrowing.
I'm going to Google that one.
And apparently the traffic held up enough Tory MPs who were likely to have voted to keep beating for the anti-beating measure to go through.
Was this a whipped vote or not?
Hey! I don't think it was.
I thought you meant she campaigned for it.
No, it just so happened the vote was... happened...
Entirely inadvertent, she did
totally
something useful.
inadvertent. By mistake. By mistake, she helped. And when was it, or is it indeed illegal in private schools? In a private school, can you...
Well, you have to pay extra, though, don't you?
I think it isn't now, but it's very recent.
The Human Rights Act must...
Yes, in 1999, basically. That's when that stopped being legal. But until then, children were beaten. And they were beaten for making mistakes, they were beaten for all kinds of different reasons. But there was this idea also that you learned better, that things literally could be beaten into you, knowledge could be beaten into you. So what happened when you came to a prince? You can't have a commoner, even their tutor, beating a prince because he's made a mistake in his algebra.
So you beat his teddy, did you? Was that
Well, you appointed someone, a child, a friend of the prince, who, when the prince made a mistake, you whipped him. And that phrase, which is in common currency, is whipping boy.
Why
That's
would you
what a
want to
whipping...
Well, and they become a peer then later on, don't they?
Yes, that's the point. It was actually a much sought-after post.
Yeah.
Fathers would want their sons to be the whipping boy. They would get close to the royal family. Charles I, for example, had a whipping boy when he was a prince, and he raced into the Earl of Dysart, a title that still exists, and they became quite powerful people. So the idea was, of course, is that they would be friends, that the prince would like his whipping boy, so that he would try hard, but obviously sometimes they might think, oh, I don't bloody care, who gets whipped. It's a most peculiar idea, but that is where the phrase whipping boy comes from.
And is there an official title as well? Because there are those titles like Silver Stick in Waiting. This could be Crimson Bottom.
Gentleman of the
coming inevitably.
Yes, Gentleman of the Stool was an existing one, as you know. It was the one who had to wipe the king's bottom under Henry VIII.
Can't they do anything themselves?
No, they seem not to be able to do anything themselves. There's a part of...
I assume you'd have a long stick.
Yes, I see.
A long stick with a rag on the end, do it from a distance.
There's a part of Germany called...
Sorry for all the mimes.
Yes,
I've always wanted to be a mime.
Yeah.
This is the only opportunity I get.
It's a lot more fun than walking into the wind. Or I suppose you might be, I don't know. But,
You may think British schoolmasters are amongst the most sadistic, but it's to Germany we turn for really good examples of how to treat children. Swabia, in west southern Germany, there was a headmaster there who logged all his punishments in a book. And over his career as headmaster at this school, he logged 911,500 canings, 121,000 floggings, as well as numerous other punishments during a 51-year career. That's nearly 400 chastisements a week. Some of the work must have been delegated, he would be exhausted. Other punishments he logs include 700 boys made to stand with peas in their shoes, not too bad, and 6,000 made to kneel on the sharp edge of a stick. This was not a nice man,
it's not about the education.
It really isn't there.
There's something more going on.
Yeah, and Eton College had a famous headmaster called Dr. Keats. There's a Keats Lane in Eton, who was known as Flogger Keats. He once flogged the entire Eton cricket team for losing to Winchester, but including the scorer. So that was the whipping boy, and there's a kind of religious equivalent, isn't there? So if you take this poor boy who takes the sins of the prince, what was there in the Jewish faith that was the equivalent?
Well, you've got the lamb or the goat, haven't you?
The goat, famously known as the...
Sacrificial...
Scapegoat.
The scapegoat,
Yes.
exactly.
I was expecting the thing to go
No,
off,
that's
yeah.
exactly what they were. A scapegoat. There's the famous Holman Hunt painting of the scapegoat. And this was during the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. The goat would be sent out, as it were, to carry the sins of the people, for the people. It bore the sins of the people. And then, of course, Christianity is just a refinement of that, where the Christ bore the sins of the people. And it happens in a lot of religions. That you offload your own wickedness onto something else. But, yeah, so it is from whipping boys to scapegoats. And they exist in the language, still, this idea of offloading one's own guilt. In the Isle of Man, they had corporal punishment until 1976. And what type of wood did they administer it with?
Well, I know I'm going to get a buzz on this because it's normally called birching, but presumably it wasn't a birch. It doesn't matter because the point
Injustice is anyway.
So did it depend on how bad you'd been? So if you were really bad, it was holly, and they left the leaves on. But if you weren't so bad, it would be like sort of willow fronds, you know, or balsa wood for you. But
Hazel. Yeah, the hazel. In Britain, birching, as it was known, was banned in 1948, but they didn't stop it until the 1970s in the Isle of Man, even though they tried to keep it by saying, all right, well, OK, what about if we let them keep their trousers on?
In America, there is still the tradition in some parts of birthday spanking. So,
really?
Yeah, where you go to school and then because it's your special day, and then there's a special treatment, the teacher takes the pedal out and you get a few. And some people say, oh, we have to ban it, it's cruel. And then others say, no, we can't, it's a tradition.
Yes.
So they have to carry on trashing the kids, I guess.
Weird.
It's a bit like family Christmas. No one likes it still, because it's a tradition, everyone has to go through it.
we get the idea of bringing a tree in to the...
That's your idea?
That's a German idea, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. Did we invent Christmas?
Well, a lot of elements of it. Obviously.
Now, I say, come on, either we invented it or we didn't.
Yeah. It's like that terrible joke, which I'm sure you must have been told, about the couple who adopt a German baby. you know it, yes, you must know it.
Is there only one joke that involves a German baby?
You know,
it doesn't speak.
It doesn't speak
Another
at
one
all.
where he doesn't speak.
He never speaks.
Yeah.
They have
Until he's about 5.
Yeah.
5.
What
And they
way to say
they
the
take him to be
punchline?
tested.
Because they think, is he stupid? Is he deaf and dumb?
Everything functioning normally,
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
And then one day...
One day.
Go on,
One
Alan.
day.
They give him...
Yeah, then he goes...
He had some
"Matze,
apple strudel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he says...
Matze, this Apfelstrudel is a bit tepid.
And they say, Wolfgang, you've never spoken before. After all these years, now you finally speak. Why haven't you spoken before? And he says...
Up until now, everything had been satisfactory.
It's a great joke. Very
Do you know,
pleasing.
this
That's
is,
like a relay joke.
Yeah, it was.
this is the most fun a Danish person has had with a German since 1940.
Don't mention the war!
There you go. Well, there you go. Yes,
It's funny, the war. I mean, I have to chip in now. I mean, the war. The war is always World War II.
Yeah.
It's never any of the more current ones.
No, that's true.
They go with the war, and everyone in Britain takes personal credit for Britain winning it. Even people that weren't born at the time of World War II, they still take personal credit for Britain winning it. I've personally been a lot more annoyed by the Brits that are now in their 70s, and they bang on about how they helped win the war. I mean, let's quickly do the maths. If you're in your 70s now, how old were you at the end of World War II?
That's true.
Maybe 10 years old? Yeah. How did you help win the war? When you were just 10 years old, you did not help win the war.
By not eating bananas.
Yeah. You were nothing but a drain on British resources.
You've got to admire his guts, haven't you?
Effectively, every 70-year-old Brit effectively fought on the side of Nazi Germany. And lost the war every little bit as much as we did.
Yes, well, moving on. Manx birches were actually made from hazel wands. Now, for a bit more international injustice, name a French book that can never be translated into German. This book was written with the express orders of its author that it was never to be translated into German.
And let's be honest, if that book originally was from France, there will be a very, very small market in Germany for that only. They might translate it all they want, they will just not find anyone who buys it.
Somebody who hates the Germans.
He particularly hated Prussians. That might date him better. Why would a Frenchman hate Prussians rather than...
Because the Franco-Prussian War.
The Franco-Prussian War.
Another war, I'm afraid, we don't want to
Another war, which...
But at least it's a different one.
Yeah, at least it's a different one. And we weren't involved.
No, we weren't involved. We would have won it had we been involved.
Had we been.
Had we been born, had we been old enough.
Yes.
1870.
1870 is exactly the year of the Franco-Prussian War. Very good. And the
school.
Commune and everything, absolutely.
Yes.
Very good. He was a scientist, great scientist.
Pasteur.
Louis Pasteur is the right answer, who was responsible, of course, well, he actually didn't invent pasteurization, but it's named after him.
Why did you hate the German?
I think it really was the occupation and the attack into French territory. He was very patriotic.
Just narrow-mindedness.
And narrow-minded. But after the war, the Germans discovered a new form of yeast that allowed them to store beer extremely well. And the German for to store is...
Lagern.
Lagen, and so they called the beer lager, beer, and it became hugely successful. Yeah. And this annoyed the hell out of Pasteur, that the Germans that he so hated had basically started to conquer the world of beer. So he'd set about studying...
He needed to move on.
I know, well, he set about studying how brewing worked, the science of the yeasts and the whole business of making beer. And he came up with some really, really, really good yeasts that made even better beer. And he took them around the world. He took them to America, he took them to Belgium, he took them to the Whitbread Company, he took them to the Carlsberg Company in Denmark, but he refused to take them to Germany. And he wrote a book all about it, instructing that it must never be translated into German. The Germans must never get their hands on the secrets for this new, better beer.
And of course, the German beer industry collapsed.
Unfortunately, it didn't work that well. It turned out nicely for the Carlsberg people.
There is an irony about the whole Pasteur thing, because when France wanted to get rid of its bouillon during the Second World War, in case the Germans got hold of it, it was
It's bouillon,
taken...
not its bouillon.
Bouillon.
Yes.
It's gold.
It's not its chicken stock.
No, not its chicken stock.
Yeah.
That went as well. It all went to Canada on a single ocean liner. It's called the SS Pasteur.
Oh, really?
Oh. So he kind of got his own back, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah.
Back home to Britain now. From 1875 to 1956, what was the next best thing to a first-class train ticket?
Second-class train ticket.
That's the problem. You weren't to know, being a cursed foreigner and all.
We went to first to
There
third,
was
and
no
they
second
abolished the
class.
second class.
There was first and third.
But there were ladies-only carriages.
There were ladies-only carriages.
That would be
true.
quite nice.
Yes. There was And there were no smoking carriages, but mostly there were smoking
She's
ones.
got no idea where she's going.
How it came about was that Gladstone insisted there be a third-class service for the poorer people, and the train companies hated it. And so they ran these useless services that were third-class only, which were known as parliamentary trains, that were no good to anybody, just to apply the law. And then they had an even smarter idea, and they said, oh, we'll upgrade the third class to second class, but call it third class, and get rid of the second class. So we're obeying the law by having a third class, but it'll cost what second class used to cost. It's a very bizarre British solution.
It had an influence. I found this out when I was making a documentary. They had an influence.